Joe here. I apologize for the technical difficulties of the following episode. As you will see, Jeff and I appear separately on screen, although we were talking with each other. Ordinarily, we would redo this episode. However, because of the timely nature of the subject, we concluded that posting this was more important than achieving technical perfection. Thank you for your patience and indulgence and for listening. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Everyday Night. I'm Joe.
And I'm Jeff.
And Jeff, we're going to continue our discussion of Timothy Snyder's book, 20 Lessons, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century on Tyranny.
Right.
Tyranny is the name of the book, and we're going to continue talking about it because it seemed apropos of the current situation.
Right. So this is part deux.
Part deux, as opposed to part duh, which
it's all part duh.
Yeah, exactly. So before we begin,
yes,
how have you fortified yourself for the evening's discussion?
Well, as you may see, I have sustained a wound.
Yes,
and so I'm anesthetizing myself.
Oh, medicinal purposes.
Yes,
snake bite preventative.
Yes, exactly. And you know, I think it'll ward off tetanus too if I drink enough.
Oh,
at least my plan, anyway.
It'll ward off a lot of things.
Yeah, right.
Friends, neighbors.
Who needs them? I'm an island.
Yeah.
So I've got my sort of.
Is that all? Is that tall?
Is that tall?
Is that tall?
Yeah, I got it. I see what you did there. I've got my usual. It's the breakfast. No, well, breakfast of degenerates whiskey from Indiana Whiskey, which is a bourbon aged in maple syrup barrels.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a smoked maple cherry bitters and some Fever Tree ginger beer.
Sounds pretty good.
It's kind of become my kind of go-to cocktail until I run out of the maple whiskey.
There's you can always get more. So
I can. I know where it comes from.
Good.
And you, sir, what's your libation for the evening?
I'm keeping it simple tonight. This is a glass of Vouvray from.
Ooh, it doesn't sound simple. It sounds very fancy.
Vouvray, France. It's nice. It's light. It's refreshing. Some fruit, citrus flavors, nice aroma. This is wishful thinking that warm weather would get here because it's often tend to have this during warmer weather.
Yeah, I think we've got about a week left.
So yeah,
before things get better. But all right, cheers.
Cheers. So we covered the first 10 of the 20 lessons from the 20th century on tyranny. To reiterate, 1, do not obey in advance. 2, defend institutions. 3, beware the one-party state. 4, take responsibility for the face of the world. 5, remember professional ethics. 6, be wary of paramilitaries. 7, be reflective if you must be armed. 7, that was 7. 8, stand out. 9, be kind to our language. 10, believe in truth.
Which is a weird thing that you have to admonish people to do, right?
Well, and I think, as I mentioned during our last discussion on these 10, the first 10, I've had a lot of discussions with people who have opinions, but have not, based on feelings, but have not come to conclusions based on facts. And they think they have, but they don't seem to understand the difference. And it's significant because I'll ask people what their source of information is, and there's question their sources of information, which are questionable, but I've had people question peer-reviewed studies, documentary evidence, and I think it's only gotten worse with deep fakes and AI and that sort of thing. I before I have a discussion with somebody, I will say the first thing we need to agree on to be able to have a discussion, we have to agree on terms and definitions, and
Right.
we have to agree on what credible sources of information are, and therefore what facts are. And if we can't agree on that, there's no basis for a discussion. It's playing pigeon chess. If you're
Yeah. Yeah.
For those who aren't familiar with it, you don't play chess with a pigeon because all they do is knock over all the pieces and crap on the board and lately declare that they've won the game. So,
Well, this leads actually nicely to number 11.
yes. Number 11, investigate. Figure things out for yourself. Spend more time with long articles.
Yeah.
Subsidize investigative journalism by subscribing to print media. Realize that some of what's on the internet is there to harm you. Learn about sites that investigate propaganda campaigns, some of which come from abroad. Take responsibility for what you communicate with others.
Right.
So,
And a lot of that is if you're reading an article, look at if they cite sources.
yes,
If they don't cite sources, be suspicious
yes.
of an article that does not cite sources.
Now, when I've been teaching and explaining primary sources, secondary and tertiary sources, saying if you go to if you read an article
Right.
that quotes another article, go to that article that's quoted.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're quoting another article, go to that one. And if they're quoting, keep tracking back until it's quoting an actual study, scientific study,
Yeah.
and then go to that study and read that and quote that. And I've shown an example where the article about a study was not correctly citing the study. They were, I don't mean the
Right.
citation format, I mean, they were misrepresenting the conclusions of a study. And that happens a lot. Find out for yourself, and you have to dig. And this is one of the purposes of education, is to teach people to not just learn to think for themselves, but learn to find the actual data to think
Yes.
about for
Yes.
themselves.
A-
So,
And being able to distinguish a reputable source from
yes.
a disreputable
Yes.
source
Um,
from
I
propaganda.
I had to actually give students a list of non credible sources that they would find online.
Hmm.
And I said, this cannot possibly be an exhaustive list. But here's what these things
Right.
have in common. They don't cite sources. They often don't cite the author of the article. They have a lot of advertising often embedded in it. It's clickbait. The headline is sensational. It's all sorts of stuff that I was describing to them. Still, some of them would do it, but it takes repetition
Right.
for most people to learn things. It takes repetition, and that's why you see in advertising, you see commercials, ads repeated, because and there's different studies saying the rule of thumb is somewhere between 3 and 7 repetitions for a message to stick with
Hmm.
a person. But after that, people get annoyed with it.
Okay.
So,
So they're always looking for the sweet spot.
right. But some of what's on the internet is there to harm you. How do you recognize what a bot is? How do you
Hmm.
recognize okay, you posted something or you see something and there are lots of negative comments, and you click on, say, one of the negative commenters, and say it's Facebook. They've been on Facebook for a week. They have no friends. They have no data.
Right. Yeah.
They have a picture that looks like a stock photo or AI. You know,
Right.
it's
Right.
it's not real because it's on the internet. So, um, so take responsibility for what you communicate to others. I have
You missed one.
Oh, yes. Learn about sites that investigate propaganda campaigns, some of which come from abroad. Yeah. So I have a lot of fact checking sites that I refer to and search for, or you can just put in the thing you're looking for, debunk, and see if
Yeah. Right.
somebody's debunked it when you're searching, because it's true. And before, it's is related to the next one, before you communicate something, before you share a post, before you repost something, check its veracity.
Yeah.
Snopes.com, factcheck.org. There's a bunch of fact checking sites. I've had people say, oh, that's facts are just propaganda.
No,
No,
that's the
facts are
opposite of
the opposite
propaganda.
of propaganda. Um, so check that first. And pointed out, I have pointed out to people on occasion, this is not correct. This is not accurate. This is not true. And most of the people who I do that with say, thank you. I'm sorry, I should have checked. Occasionally people will say, yeah, I don't care. It sounds good.
Right. Yeah.
Well, you're
That
degrading,
resonates with me.
yeah, you're degrading the conversation then
Yeah.
if you're
Yeah.
doing that. So don't do that. Um, okay.
So 11, investigate.
11, investigate.
12.
I would add to that, learn how to investigate well if you do not already know how to do it. Some people think they know how to do it. Googling something does not equal research.
Right. And asking Grok to a question is not research.
Grok.
Grok is Twitter's AI.
Oh, I I got off that platform a long time
Right.
ago.
No, I
Yeah,
know,
but
but I'm just saying
any AI, yeah,
that was something that was thrown at me the other day when I said something. They were, well, let me look this up, and all they did was type my question to them into Grok, and then they just turned to me and read from the screen. Is that what you had been doing to investigate the truth of these things? Is that it?
yeah. I just saw a thing about a phrase that has been picked up and repeated in studies that are obviously no good. And it came from AI, and it was words in two adjacent columns, but it picked up the words across from each other and then created this new term that doesn't exist. And
Okay,
and gave that as an answer, and then people using AI to write didn't catch that that was bullshit, because
hmm.
people are using, as we know in our conversation, two conversations about AI, that some people will use it to draft, to write a first draft, but
Yeah,
then they'll refine and edit. Well, if they don't do that, then who knows what it's picking up? It's producing crap. It's just repeating crap. So,
sure.
number 12, make eye contact and small talk. This is not just polite, it is part of being a citizen and responsible member of society. It is also a way to stay in touch with your surroundings, break down social barriers, and understand whom you should and should not trust. If we enter a culture of denunciation, you will want to know the psychological landscape of your daily life.
Interesting
You
phrase.
you and I have both mentioned before that we will see somebody well dressed in a who's complete stranger. We don't know, somebody well dressed, and we'll say, "Hey, you're looking very good, well dressed today,
Right.
nicely put together, nice hat, something," and then
Hmm.
smile,
Yeah.
walk on the way, and then they smile, and it's a really helpful thing to create. It's a small thing that everybody can do, creates a positive, much more positive society. Um, at the hands off large protest event, um, people are complimenting each other on signs,
Yeah. Hmm.
saying, "Hey, great to see you out here. Thanks for being here. It was
Yep.
really good."
As I was walking from where I parked to where the rally was actually going on, someone just walking next to me just started engaging me in conversation.
Yeah, and
Oh,
I think that's great. And
yeah. Now
um,
we should recognize that there are some neurodivergent types that have trouble simply walking up to a stranger and speaking to them, and that's fine.
yeah,
But what you can do, what you can do
exactly.
to engage people around you,
Yep. Um,
and there's an aspect to that that is humanizing the people around you
yes,
is absolutely vital.
yes, absolutely. And there are in we've certainly read about it in dystopian novels, but it was in those novels were drawn from tyrannical societies where people didn't trust each other. If you if you greeted somebody, smiled, said a wrong word, you'd be suspicious. You might A suspicious person, you might be turned in for
Yeah,
suspicion of harboring intent against the state. Well, look at, and we've talked about this too. There are people who are being disappeared, taken off the street
hmm,
for suspicion of being here illegally, without warrants, without due process, by people who are not identified in uniform or as law
right,
enforcement. That's really bad. That's really bad. Even people who have done something, who have encouraged, not just encouraged, but acted maliciously with vandalism or criminal action,
right,
they deserve due process.
right.
Because if we take away due process from them,
Yeah, due
yeah,
process, if due process is gone, if it is not always enacted.
yes, yes.
That's that's just how it works.
And I think the other aspect of this is that the 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 American myth of the Rambo, the Clint Eastwood, the lone, the riding off
Yeah.
into the sunset, in surviving in the wilderness all by himself. We've talked about this before too. Community is strength. And so if you know people you can trust and know who you can trust and who can trust you, you'll all be better off.
Yeah.
And um as he says here, having old friends is the politics of last resort, and making new ones is the first step toward change.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
Okay.
So um practice corporeal politics.
Number 13. I
Number
found this one to
13.
be interesting. Corporeal politics.
Yes. People want your body softening, power wants your body softening in your chair and your emotions dissipating on the screen.
Hmm.
Get outside, put your body in unfamiliar places with unfamiliar people, make new friends, and march with them. I think we did the last bit, but yeah, get out of your chair, go outside if you can, move, walk, talk to people.
Yeah.
Don't live your life through a screen. We're talking through a screen now, but don't live your life through a screen. It's you engaging with real people is essential. You
Yes.
don't know through a screen if you meet new people. You don't know if what you're seeing is what really is, given technology. And wow, how many movies have we seen of well, The Matrix, and then there was that Bruce Willis movie with
12 Monkeys.
no the other yeah the other one where people were just strapped into their chairs and they're keeping their bodies safe supposedly, but their
Oh,
avatars were going out walking around,
Surrogate?
something like
That,
that, and their avatars were walking around, but their
right.
bodies were wasting away and their minds were wasting away in to keep it safe. We're meant to move, to think, to interact with our environments. So,
Right.
um,
And and it actually does. I mean, we're all or we're all a little scared about what's going on,
yes,
right? And sometimes, and I felt this last week when we did this hands-off thing. You and I went to different
mm-hmm.
um, rallies in our nearer to our homes, but getting up, just doing something felt better than just being fed the panic and the paranoia
Yes,
constantly. It who knows what it accomplished, but you got to feel like you were part of something.
yes,
And what was it? 2.5 million
closer to, well, yeah,
in the
estimates
US.
over three,
Okay.
possibly over 3 million. One estimate put it closer to 5 million.
I heard a 5.2 including all the international
Yeah.
ones.
So
But
the
and I think that number might be conservative because that I think they used the registration count for that number.
not everybody registered. I'm
Right,
sure.
exactly.
The it accomplished another thing, couple of things. It let people know that they weren't alone. They
Right.
really weren't alone.
Yep.
It also got people used to the idea of getting up and getting out and doing something and expressing themselves. And this is important because I've posted about this study before, and there were people writing about it, talking about it. 3.5%.
Yes.
So a study, and I read the article on the BBC about this study, that in the history of the of tyrannical regimes being deposed, the highest likelihood of success came when the mass rally was peaceful and was at least 3.5% of the population.
Okay.
So in the United States, that would be about 12 million people.
Right.
So, but asking people to do that for the first time is a big stretch. I
Right.
think this was this was training wheels,
Sure.
getting people used to it, right?
Yep. But
Um,
I was delighted, surprised and delighted. I have not heard a single negative news story, even from the propaganda people,
yeah,
about how these things turned violent. That
no.
that there was
And
looting or robbing or and they were blocking off streets and none of that. I haven't heard a peep.
in fact, where we were, uh, was two-way street, an avenue, two ways, a median, and medians had a crosswalk, and they were saying, stay off the grass. We don't want anyone to say we've done any damage. We want, very respectful of the environment. Don't deface anything, so on. It's good. It was funny because right off on the grass near where we were standing was a dead rat. And everybody walked by was saying, "Oh, hi, Elon." um, but yeah, there's, and he talks later about why, I think he talks later why these need to be peaceful. Let me see. Maybe not. I will mention it here in case it doesn't come up further. That, oh, I think this I read somewhere else. If there is, and maybe it was an earlier one, if these massive rallies, what may eventually become a nationwide strike,
Yeah.
it's possible at 12 million people, 3.5% of the population or more, that's essentially a nationwide strike. This was on the weekend. If it happens during the week and it sustains for days and days, it's equivalent of a national strike. And if violence breaks out, it gives the propaganda machine
Hmm.
an opportunity to criticize it. It also gives the enforcers an opportunity to crack down,
An excuse to crack
an
down.
excuse to do that. So one thing we have to watch for are agents provocateur,
Yes.
um, people who are embed themselves in a peaceful protest and then start encouraging violence or start acting violently in order to give the authorities an excuse to crack down. And those have to be watched for, and those have to be squelched from within the peaceful ranks.
Yes.
Um, so, okay.
Okay.
14, establish a private life. Nastier rulers will use what they know about you to push you around. Scrub your computer of malware on a regular basis. Remember that email is skywriting. Consider using alternative forms of the internet or simply using it less. Have personal exchanges in person. For the same reason, resolve any legal trouble. Tyrants seek the hook on which to hang you. Try not to have hooks.
Mm.
Yes. Private thought. Private, I mean, we are sharing our thoughts and have been for some years now in this
Yep.
forum. And there were press photographers and cameras at the rally, and people were covering, holding up their signs in front of their faces. There were a few people wearing masks for presumably health
Yeah.
precautions
Right.
in public, which makes sense. But I said, I want let them see my face. I'm here and I'm not hiding that. So I think this relates very much to look at credible sources of information. And don't click on email attachments. Don't click on
Right.
social media links. There people post clip from a movie and then won't say what the movie is. I've seen this a lot. Post a clip from a movie, won't say what the movie is. You go in the comments and somebody will say, "Oh, you can watch it here. Click
Yeah.
this link." Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, no. So, and I have been going through and deleting emails and unsubscribing from things, and they keep showing up faster than I can get rid of them.
Yeah.
So I may at some point just delete that whole account. I created another email account for getting information about things, so it would all go there.
Yeah.
But
It
that's
still gets filled up with
still
spam.
good. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
um, the people who believed the the misinformation, disinformation, emails, flooding, the social media stuff, and still don't understand that this was an intentional targeting of US elections
Yep.
from overseas. It's it's I don't want to be doom scrolling all day and just
Right. Right.
and the algorithm of social media says, oh, you reacted to this, I'm going to send you more, because the angrier you get, the more you click, the more you watch.
Right.
That's really problematic. um I think get out there and do something is in person is really good. um there are also encrypted chat
Yep.
apps you can use, and um there are other things you can do to protect your messaging privacy as well.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't recommend Signal right now.
well, it's okay if you don't invite a journalist, maybe. Um, it's not okay for state secrets, top secret
No.
information.
And
Um,
there's all kinds of laws about that, and I'm
yeah,
kind of surprised there aren't any. Well, I'm only slightly surprised that.
nobody's been fired, investigated. If I heard from a number of our mutual friends who, with military experience and and um, classified experience of some various classifications, that if they had done this, it would have been,
Oh, yeah,
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 yeah, there would have been
and
consequences, severe
and
consequences.
and even amongst not rank and file military, but even amongst the the levels at which that whole thing happened, there's a record recording law
Yeah, yeah,
that covers that kind of conversation.
yeah. You're supposed to keep records of those things.
You are required, it is a law.
Yeah,
It is, you are required by law to
yeah,
record those conversations and any kind of that and all that planning. And that using that encrypted app was a conscious and deliberate effort to sidestep that law. And
yes.
nobody's talking about it.
And apparently they've had a lot of those.
Well, of course there is. That's just the one we heard of.
Yeah, the reporting has already found many more similar conversations. So um essentially, be an individual as a member of a community, don't be a mob.
Okay.
No mob thing. So 15, contribute to good causes. Be active in organizations, political or not, that express your own view of life. Pick a charity or two and set up autopay. Then you will have made a free choice that supports civil society and helps others do good.
Right. And that's something if you really are not the kind of person that is comfortable going out into big crowds of strangers,
Yeah.
that's a thing you can do.
Yes. Um, I like to think, without intending this to be self aggrandizing, that one of the things we've been doing here is trying to be a voice for the virtues, the premise
Yeah.
of what we
Hmm.
do, and express that positive view of life and aspirational behavior. So, um,
Yeah, I hope that
yeah,
I hope that we are doing some little bit of good out there. I hope
yeah,
that some, out of every 15 episodes, one thing resonates with one person and they go, "Huh, I hadn't thought of it like that before. Maybe this could inform my decisions in future." That's all we
or yeah, yeah, or it says, "Oh, I'm not the only one who thinks this way."
Yeah, well, that's true. Anytime,
Yeah.
anytime you speak up
I
or you call out bad behavior.
yes, and I've, I've mentioned this before that when my aunts and uncles would say something objectionable when I was a kid, I would speak up, and my mother would say to me, "I you're not going to change them." I said, "I know, but if I'm silent, I'm complicit." And I found in
Yeah.
social media, if I unless I simply block somebody, if I choose to engage with somebody, I'm not intending to change them, but I want everybody else to see what the counter arguments
Mhm.
are to their bullshit so that they don't just accept. And so that maybe every time they say this, people will say, no, what are your sources? No, you made an assertion. You have the burden of proof. Prove what you're saying. No, you can't just say this. No, it's uncivil. No, you can't do it, and so on. Right?
Yeah. I mean, I expressed this to somebody um, a few days ago at work that when somebody says something vile in my presence, I feel like I've gotten something on me.
Yes.
And calling them on it is an effort on my part to get it off so that I can feel clean again. Because if I don't say anything, I feel like I'm just going to carry that around with me.
Yeah.
And I don't like the feeling of that I let it go, that I let it just stick to me.
Well, that's a good way of thinking about it. That's yeah. It's like something
So,
on your shoe or it smells bad or
yeah, right.
yeah.
Yeah. Someone's spattered me with ick and I want to get it off.
Yep. Um it's it's likely in difficult times that people will think that any non-political or any non-dissonant activity is not contributing somehow, but it's not true. Doing normal things with good people, building community is actually giving people a post bad times vision of what could
Hmm,
be.
right. Well, it
So,
also can give people a sort of a stable ground to stand
yeah,
on that
exactly. Yeah.
things, everything isn't falling apart. These people are with me and I'm with them. And
Yep.
that's something. That's not
Yep.
nothing.
And it extends, goes to the next point, extends elsewhere. 16, learn from peers in other countries. Keep up your friendships abroad or make new friends in other countries. The present difficulties in the United States are an element of a larger trend, and no country is going to find a solution by itself. Make sure you and your family have passports.
Yeah.
Um, we do. I'm going to renew mine before it expires. And uh, we also um, we also uh, applied for and got trusted traveler, which is facilitates your re-entry into the United States
Hmm.
and includes TSA pre-check, although we had already gotten that.
No.
Um, and that's, I think, all of those things are potentially useful. Um, but I've also communicated. We have friends in other places. Certainly you and I both know a lot of people in Canada.
Yeah.
I know people in some other countries who I have communicated with, and I think making your, making yourself known to people in other countries as not one of
Not an
them,
not an ugly American.
yes, but one of the,
Yeah.
you know, um, I think is potentially useful as
Hmm.
well if it comes to that. Um,
Well, hopefully our huge and widespread audience will
yes,
help us establish our credentials.
yes. When we have to broadcast this from an underground shelter somewhere in an
From an offshore freighter.
yes, an unknown location.
Hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
Pirate internet.
Um, yeah, most Americans don't have passports.
Right, which is going to be interesting come election time.
Yeah, because if they're really trying to say not just you have not just ID,
Yeah,
but proof of citizenship,
right.
that's that could be challenging for people to do if you don't have a passport. Um, so yeah, maybe the and with reductions in federal workforce, who knows how long it will take
Hmm.
to have one processed. So there is that. Um, um, 17, listen for dangerous words. Be alert to the use of the words extremism and terrorism. Be alive to the fatal notions of emergency and exception. Be angry about the treacherous use of patriotic vocabulary.
Oh, yeah.
Now, it certainly is, um, as we're recording this, um, I may move it up in the queue depending. It's there on later in April. Um, it's people are anticipating the possibility of an emergency declaration.
Martial law.
Yes, that could be challenging. Um, um,
Yeah, I'm wondering when the bridge too far is for all of these Second Amendment, don't tread on me
yeah.
boneheads out there.
Well, it wasn't apparently the loss of freedom, but the reduction in their 401k. That was apparently a thing. Now, it certainly is true that there are people who have extreme views, which is
Yes.
not necessarily a bad thing. Um, but and people can think whatever they want. It's the actions. If people act in a way that is terroristic and
Hmm.
actual terrorism against civilians, harm, destruction,
Yep.
that sort of thing, that's problematic. For now, we can think whatever we want. We can even say what we want, not without consequences. People confuse what the First Amendment means. It means that the government will
Right.
not restrict what you say. It doesn't mean you're free of consequences. If somebody says some, the example, yells fire in a crowded theater,
Right.
causes a panic, that's a criminal offense. That's
Yes.
not an exercise of free speech. If somebody disrupts a performance in a theater, that's also not free speech. They can be, it's a
Private venue.
private venue, not a, they can be trespassed, they can be removed,
Yep.
they can be, they're disturbing the peace. Um, so, but you do, people do have to know what their rights are and not obey in advance, as we have talked about previously. Um, um, yes, emergency. So there's a really good book, I mentioned it before, called The Shock Doctrine, about how governments use shock events they um, opportunistically use shock events, not necessarily cause them to happen, but opportunistically use them to consolidate power.
Right.
And that can be, decline in the stock market. So it's possible to cause that, use that to consolidate power, and then, you
Well,
know,
this was something that was kept being talked about during the Black Lives Matter movement at its height. And it would be, and this was repeated over and over again, that uh, rally permits for gathering and protesting and that sort of thing, those are all filed, and those have a time limit.
mm-hmm.
So what would happen over and over again, we saw, if you bother to look, is that people would show up at the beginning of the rally and they would have speakers and they would talk and there'd be chanting and there'd be this and that. There was it got worse and worse, a heavy police presence
Mm-hmm.
around these. And then the license would expire and 90% of the people would go away,
Yeah.
would just leave peacefully. Some percentage would stay and the police would start to sweep them off the street. Sometimes too aggressively, sometimes, and it could go both ways. I mean, that
Yeah.
some protesters resisted, leaving the streets or whatever. But those are the only pictures that certain media
Yes.
would put out of, you know, fires being started and, police in violent conflict with protesters and stuff. They didn't show the 4 hours of completely peaceful people just standing around in the daylight
Yeah.
and then going back to their cars.
Yeah. And I remember talking to people saying, well, look, you see, they burned down Portland. We
I
didn't
went
burn
to
down
Portland.
Portland.
No,
No.
yeah, I didn't. I went to
And
Portland.
there's, and certainly video of somebody, a masked person breaking windows who
Yep,
appeared to be white, breaking windows, and with other people trying to stop him, but he had a club he was
right.
breaking windows with.
And he
Um,
wasn't looting. He was just
just
going along and breaking windows in a building,
yes,
just smashing them, just to smash the window.
yeah. So, um, um, it, yeah. And again, I think that speech is protected, but not necessarily without consequences. Depending on how it's done and where it's done and when it's done. Violent action is criminal. Um, uh, it's important to distinguish between those, but in either case, in any case, people, citizen or not, deserve due process.
Yes,
So,
correct.
yeah. Um, Number 18, be calm when the unthinkable arrives.
Easy to say, I
Yeah.
suppose.
Modern tyranny is terror management. When the terrorist attack comes, remember that authoritarians exploit such events in order to consolidate power. The sudden disaster that requires the end of checks and balances, the dissolution of opposition parties, the suspension of freedom of expression, the right to a fair trial, and so on, is the oldest trick in the Hitlerian book. Do not fall for it.
Hmm.
So let's say that um, a newly elected president of the United States declares a national emergency at the southern border because of we're being invaded by criminal gangs who are bringing in fentanyl by ton loads, right? Um, and we can't contain it. We have to declare a national state of emergency,
Right.
and
Well, because
therefore,
we got too many long borders to guard now.
yeah. So we have to declare national emergency. We've got to close the borders. We have to round up and kick out any illegal aliens who are criminals. Oh, any illegal aliens who are not criminals. Oh, any aliens. Oh, anyone. Uh, anyone who disagrees. Oh, it's the national emergency continues. We cannot hold elections during this
Yes,
time. We will,
because a transition would be disastrous.
yes, we will dissolve Congress. This state government is opposing us. The governor must be arrested and so on. I it's it sounds crazy.
It
And
sounds,
yet,
but it's what's funny is that any of that, all of that would have sounded crazy 10 years ago.
yeah,
Now, less and less of it, or I should say more and more of it sounds like we've already done this. We're right on the edge of taking that step,
yeah,
or
yeah,
and that third step, or that, yeah, when is it become a bridge too far for some people?
yeah. I wonder about that. When our and I think that um firing the the top generals, replacing
Yep.
the
The chiefs of staff,
chiefs of
joint,
staff, head of military, the secretary of defense, all of that, then declaring martial law, meaning you can actually deploy the military on U.S. soil,
hmm
which the president can't otherwise, because of posse comitatus. Um, that, um, I mean, Congress already granted
economic powers.
emergency economic powers, but it's not very far from that to,
No, certainly not. And
and because, oh, to save the economy, we have to do these other things.
and of
It's a
course the economy's tanking anyway
a
because
pretext.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, it's difficult to contemplate how we've even gotten here. The it's so and what gets to me so is that this has been seen before. These
yeah,
steps have been laid out in dozens, hundreds probably of books on previous fascist takeovers.
yes,
And all the steps are there and they're being followed like it's a checklist,
yeah, like
one
it's
right after another.
following a playbook. Yeah,
Yeah. So, and why won't, why can't people recognize that? It doesn't matter what side they're on. If it was, I don't know, if Barack Obama had at some point decided he was going to declare martial law, I don't know. You and I certainly wouldn't have said, well, he's probably got a good reason for
yeah,
doing
no, mm-mm,
that.
no,
No.
no.
So
It's yeah. Imagining him doing that's crazy.
right. And we've also had, I mean, it's weird. It's funny when the I'm gonna talk left and right here again for a minute, but the right cries and screams and pounds their desks and stamps their feet about their rights. And they're trying to take away our rights. Every right that has been taken away in the last 60 years has been taken away by Republicans,
Yeah.
by Republican administrations, not by Democrats. Democrats are trying to add rights, or at least give the same rights to more people.
Yes. They're not trying to give rights to people who, in preference over other people, they're trying to make sure that everybody has access to the same rights.
Right.
Um,
And but
despite
then
the arguments to the contrary.
yeah, but things like the Patriot Act,
Yeah.
that was a suspension of rights,
Yeah.
and it's still in effect.
Yeah.
It has not been repealed or rescinded or taken down or
Well,
any of that.
governments almost never as they gain power, they almost never give it up voluntarily.
Right. Well, exactly. And but that's my point is that this has been eroding slowly, but to the cheers of a certain segment of our population.
I need more.
Yeah, okay. So, and things like RICO laws. And the Patriot Act was after 9/11, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So then there's RICO laws, which sidestep due process, where it allows police departments to seize assets that may have been
Well, I
acquired.
think there's another thing that lets police departments do that, seize assets of suspected people and then not return them even if they're not convicted. Um, and there are some police departments who fund themselves doing that.
Yep.
RICO actually has been applied more carefully than that because you have it requires due process. They have to prove a a conspiracy to do these
Well,
things.
except that the the federal law is very broad and gives power to the states. So the individual states can decide how they apply their um, what's the word I want? They can apply they can decide how they apply it. So it varies state to state. Some states are very careful, and some states go through all due process and all that. Other states,
If it's a We need to look into this because if it's a federal law, it's not applied by the states, it's applied by the
it's interpretation, I guess, is the word I'm
yeah,
looking
but
for.
it would be the attorneys general for not of the states but of the districts, like and they're federal, they're not. Anyway, I'd have to look into it. I don't know enough about it to talk about it. Um, to talk about it clearly, and therefore I need to do research.
I'm okay, but
So let me ask my AI assistant here.
yeah.
Yeah.
So my point is only that this is just another. It's all. What we have to do is these people are bad. Clearly, we have to do something drastic because the situation is so dire. We're going to take these steps, and we may blur the lines and drift into the gray area here a little bit, but it's to keep you safe.
Yeah, I think we have to watch for that. I don't know that that's happened in the way it's been applied yet. I'd want to see examples, but certainly that's a risk that has to be watched for.
Well, yeah, I'm talking about this and the Patriot Act and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Patriot Act has been abused
Oh
in
yeah. Yeah.
lots of ways.
Yes.
So, but anyway, so yeah, I'm just there.
Yeah.
There's more than one illustration of the government saying, "Well, there's an emergency here, and we're going to need to erase this part, this little. We're just going to erase this little part of the Constitution, not just this
Yeah.
little part,
Yeah.
because it's an emergency and we need to take care of it, and it's because it's an imminent threat, and we're trying to protect the people, and
Yeah. I I think there are still um detainees, prisoners at Guantanamo. The
yes,
problem being that they took them there without a clear understanding of how they would prosecute and what the laws were, um and so and some of the information that was gained from them was done so under means where it could not be used in court, and so they've got people now who they can't convict and don't believe they can release.
well, yeah, because they can't if if they're released, they could talk about how their information was extracted.
Exactly. So um fewer than there were, but still
Oh, much
it's
fewer.
shameful. um and renditioning people you pick up on the street to a prison in a foreign country.
Yeah, basically selling them.
Yeah. um, damn. Yeah. Number 19, be a patriot. Set a good example of what America means for the generations to come. They will need it. You're welcome. You know, I was just reflecting on the fact that the other day was 16 years since I started teaching college.
Hmm.
Had a long career before that, moved into doing that. And I've said, I think the years that I spent teaching, I did more good than in all the years I spent in advertising and marketing.
Well,
Yeah, that kept the economy moving and so on, but I helped people. I really did. And part of teaching is not just it's not just conveying information. It's about setting an example of showing up on time, being prepared, how you deal with people, how you talk to people, how you help people, all of that. And I feel proud of the work I did doing that.
well, I said years ago when you were early in your
Yeah.
teaching part of your career that it was much more of a calling for you than ever you were as a. I I mean, it was it was hard for me to even think of you in that sort of corporate setting doing sales because it's sales. I mean, marketing is
Well,
sales.
yeah, I was, I wasn't, to use a baseball analogy, I wasn't an opener and I wasn't necessarily the closer. I was the middle relief. They'd bring me in and I'd explain why they should choose us. Somebody else, the account executive, would get the opportunity. They'd bring me in. I explained why they should choose us, what we can do for them, how we listen, how we think of them, what our process is, all of that sort of stuff. And then the account executive steps back in and gets them to sign the contract. And that was what I did. And I certainly was not,
Well, but
yeah,
even as an
art
graphic
director.
designer and as an art director,
Yeah,
I mean, I think that you held a little one corner of your office was dedicated to your personal ethics, and I think that occasionally your coworkers ran afoul of that.
they did. And I called them on it
Yes,
whenever
and
they did,
so
always.
that you had that part of your personality was always there, even in as crass and rapacious an industry as marketing is or has
Yeah.
become at
As it,
least.
yeah, as it could be. Yeah, it certainly was at
But
times.
I think you sloughed off a lot of karmic baggage by leaving the marketing industry and becoming a teacher.
Yes. But I used everything I learned there
Well, sure,
to prepare my students to be more ethical in what they did going forward,
exactly.
and to survive it. So,
I absolutely admire that you have taken, I mean, like shows like Mad Men, right? We
yeah.
both watched that show. And I don't know, although it's supposed to be a pretty uh, clear but obviously dramatized picture of that industry in the 60s and 70s.
Well, so the agency that they depicted in the beginning days, and I watched it once it got into melodrama, I wasn't as interested. But the beginning where they were showing what things were like in a late 50s, early 60s ad agency were accurate for an agency that was behind the times,
Hmm.
because there was a revolution in advertising at that was started by in one agency where they put together writers and art directors to create. I mean, that's how the Think Small Volkswagen ad, considered the best print ad of the
Oh,
20th century, that was how that was created. You didn't get that. This agency that they were showing was a dinosaur, even then.
kind of
So
churning out the old
yeah,
stuff.
and so, but I found it interesting in that way, an interesting glimpse in that. And it's certainly true that the one woman who started as a secretary and became a chief copywriter eventually, she was modeled after a real woman,
Hmm.
who actually did that and wrote great, was a great copywriter. Um, but but there were times when, yeah, I mean the well, I've told the hair story before,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So get me the guy with the hair, you know. So,
Right.
um, but setting a good example, I think in our interactions with people, are are being courteous, being helpful. All the
Well,
virtues are the virtues that we talk about here are not just chivalric virtues, they're patriotic fucking virtues.
well, yeah. Well,
I threw the fucking in there because I thought it was necessary to emphasize, because it's a
yeah, I get it.
linguistic emphasizer.
I get it.
And
I get
okay,
it. But I think that, like you said, being a patriot also, be a patriot. A patriot is not a blind follower. A
yeah,
patriot is somebody who examines what's good for the country and tries to do what's best for the country and its population, its
yes,
entire population. The most good for the most people.
yes. I think there will, and it's different from nationalism.
Oh, absolutely.
I think it will, point of no return, or the you didn't call it that, you called it the point, the
Tipping point.
tipping point. If American soldiers deployed on U.S. soil fire on American civilians,
Fire on unarmed American civilians.
unarmed American civilians.
Yep. That, yeah. Then we are in the end stages.
Yes. However, I remember Kent State,
Yeah.
May 4th, 1970.
I
Kent
remember the
State.
riots in Detroit.
Yeah.
National
But
Guard.
yeah, but Kent State, there was a peaceful anti-war protest. The governor deployed National Guard troops onto Kent State's campus. And there's a bunch of stories. How long were they awake, and were they well trained, and so on. Someone, whether or not, it's never been definitively shown that whether protesters threw rocks or anything, but the troops fired, and 4 students were killed and others were injured, and they were not protesters. They were
Just students on campus.
students on campus, passersby.
Yep. Yeah,
And
there's horrific footage of that.
yes, um, but I remember in the aftermath of that, I remember some people saying, well, they got what they deserved for protesting against President Nixon,
Yep.
for hating America.
Yep. That's
My
and
country, love it or leave it. Um, um, and there's a quotation: "My country, right or wrong, if right," but people leave out the last part. If right, to be
to be
kept
kept
in the
right.
right, and if wrong, to be set right.
Right. And there's another, I'm gonna look this up now. I hate doing this while we
It's
are
okay.
recording.
I've got a couple of quotations from Gandalf that I'm going to include.
One of my favorite quotes by one of my favorite presidents, Teddy Roosevelt, Patriotism means to stand with the country. It does not mean to stand with the president. And there's another, he goes on in another quote that says that criticizing the president is, in fact, a patriotic duty.
Yeah.
Maybe I should have put that in. It's hard for me to type over here because my keyboard is like at the end of my reach.
Yeah.
To announce that there must be no criticism of the president or that we are to stand by the president right or wrong is not only unpatriotic and servile, but is morally treasonable to the American public.
Yes.
Good on you, Teddy.
Yep.
And that's where I'm at.
Okay. Yeah. Well, number 20, be as courageous as you can be. If none of us is prepared to die for freedom, then all of us will die under tyranny. And he gives no additional explanation of that. It needs none. He does give a quotation from Hamlet. The time is out of joint, O cursed spite, that I was ever born to set it right.
Mm.
But he concludes, nay, come, let's go together. And it reminded me of something that Tolkien had Gandalf say. Frodo says, I wish the ring had never come to me. I wish none of this had happened. And Gandalf says, so do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us. And
yeah,
the time is out of joint. And we have to decide what we're going to do to set it right.
And I would say be as courageous as you can is kind of a null sentence. Be courageous.
Yes.
Everyone
be
is
courageous.
Always,
do what you can.
yes.
That's how I would do it. Some people can do more than they should do more, but
you've got access, you've got resources, you've got
yeah.
things you can do more easily than some other people. Yeah. But being courageous, everyone is always as courageous as they can be, I think.
Well,
you are as courageous as you can be.
And some people are not at all.
Is exactly right. Either you're courageous or you're not.
Yeah.
You can't, well, this is as courageous as I can be today. I can't afford to be any more courageous than this. Then that's not being courageous.
Yeah. Gandalf also says, when Galadriel asks him why he put faith in Frodo, says, I found it the small everyday deeds of ordinary folk that keep the darkness at bay.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we have seen examples of that. People were wondering, well, what good does it do to protest on the streets? What good does it do for Senator Cory Booker to speak for more than 25 hours on the Senate floor? What good does it do? Well, it keeps the darkness at bay. It lets people know that they are not alone. It's responding to the awful things that my aunt and uncle said. My aunts and uncles said. It is keeping the darkness at bay. And I found a little, the small everyday deed. Well, it's a big everyday deed. He broke the record of the racist Senator Strom Thurmond, who was arguing against civil rights while Cory Booker, was arguing for civil rights
and
not
Strom
for
Thurmond,
rights for everyone.
And Strom Thurmond's argument was so thin that he was reduced to reading from phone books to maintain his time. Cory Booker spoke fiery, passionate speech for 25 hours.
Yeah.
He said things. He made a case.
So do you think we should do a 25-hour episode?
No, I don't want to take Cory Booker's, I
Oh,
don't want to steal his limelight, his limelight. I mean,
well, yeah, okay. But yeah, maybe two of us and we could have bathroom breaks and
maybe if we did 12 and a half hours each.
yeah, something like that. Um, so I think the um I don't want to leave people on a dour note, but I think that in knowledge there is power, as it
Mhm.
said, and with power comes,
Great power comes great responsibility.
well, I was going to say a glass of wine, but it's
Oh,
I think it's
I thought we were
necessary.
going for Spider-Man. I thought.
Yeah, well, you fell into my trap. Um, fell into my web. Um, I think that knowledge of this is important to arm for people to arm themselves first with knowledge, and then to be aware. If you understand things, you can be aware of them. Um, I recommend getting the book. I think we should start posting a reading list
Hmm.
of books.
All right.
And we can certainly do, we've referred to a lot of different books from on a lot of different subjects, including medieval history and chivalry and so on. But I think some of the books we're referring to now, I think we should post a reading list.
All right.
We even talked about maybe doing a book club at one point, but
Yeah.
there is another Timothy Snyder book called On Freedom, which is also good. I recommend. Maybe we could talk about that sometime.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm up for it.
Okay. Uh,
So those are our 20 things, our list of 20.
yeah. 20 lessons from the 20th century on tyranny. Yep.
So uh,
And we
again,
haven't, obviously, we haven't read the whole chapters to
no.
here in this. We're adding our own points of view and own understanding to the things he's saying, but I recommend to people get the book.
Right.
So
Right. So so we always share this. We always wait till the end and say to, if you like this, give us a like and a share and follow,
follow,
subscribe, recommend to your friends. Um,
add your comments, tell us what you'd like to hear us talk about. Stay safe, be courageous, and do what you can. And until we see you next time, be thou
a good night.
and true.